Good day, my dear humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Um, Today's guest, I've been trying to get him on for a little while, and because I think his case is one of the most important cases in UFO history, and it is also one of the least talked about today. I don't know where the fear to talk about this comes from, but we're going to explore it today. My guest today is Air Force veteran, Mr. Robert Salas, who used to be a missiles engineer at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And on March 24th, 1967, uh, orbs or UFOs were spotted at Malmstrom, and they turned off 10 missiles, if I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Robert Salas was right there when the experience took place. So it is an honor for me to welcome Mr. Robert Salas to the show. Welcome, Mr. Salas. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you, Pablo, for having me on. I'm sorry I've been kind of elusive lately, but here I am. Happy to answer any of your questions and any any questions your audience may have.
Not to worry, sir. I understand that we're like busy people. I'm just glad that you're here, and I'm sure everybody's glad to see you too, because I've been telling them that I'm gonna talk to you, and they were very excited. So, okay, so let's start with, if you're okay with that, just going skimming through what happened back then at Malmstrom, because
Okay.
it happened in March 24th, 1967. Is that okay? Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct. So I was uh, part of a two-man crew. Uh, we were considered a launch crew. I think that was our title. Uh, that would be in charge of or and responsible for 10 Minuteman I missiles. Um, and of course, these were nuclear missiles, strategic missiles, meaning they could travel a very long distance uh, against targets. And on March 24th, we were at a place called uh, Oscar Flight. Oscar is simply a word we use for O in the military. So it was the Oscar Flight Launch Control Center is our location. The missiles were actually about a mile or two away from this location where we were, the Launch Control Center. And we were 60 feet underground. We were locked into a concrete capsule, um, concrete and steel, and locked in by a huge door until we were relieved the next morning. So we were there for 24 hours. We had guards upstairs. I think we had six or so guards, security guards that would maintain the security of this of the area above us. And of course, it was a big fenced area. Uh, and they would also guard the launch facilities where the missiles were located, about a mile away. Um, so that evening, I was on duty as the in command of the facility, and I got a phone call from my guard upstairs, the main guard, and he said, "Sir, there's strange lights flying overhead. They're flying very fast, stopping in midair, reversing course, making 90-degree turns, and they have there's no engine noise. They're flying right above us." I said, "Wow." He said, "They are not aircraft, sir." I said, "You mean like UFOs?" I use that term because in the local newspaper in Great Falls, Montana, where we lived, there had been reports that week of lights in the sky being reported by various citizens, farmers, etc. and the word UFO came up there. It wasn't that I was focused on UFOs at the time. I had really no interest in the subject at the time. So I was joking with him, I thought, but then he very seriously said, "Sir, these are not airplanes that of any kind that
Oh,
I know of." I said, "Okay, well," uh, I kind of ended the conversation there. I said, "Let me know if anything interesting happens," and basically hung up. And then 5 minutes later, he calls back, and this time he's screaming into the phone. He's obviously very frightened. He's yelling. Uh, I can't make much sense out of him. I calm him down, and then finally, he says, I've got all the guards out. Their weapons are pointed at this glowing red-orange object hovering right above the front gate. So, and it was a pulsating light, a very bright, pulsating red light. Uh, he wanted me to tell him what to do next. I didn't know what to think. Of course, nothing like this had ever been reported to me before. Um, I simply told him, make sure the facility is secure, do whatever it takes to maintain security up there. And then he said, "Sir, one of my guards got injured." So he hung up the phone. And I went over to talk to my commander, who was taking a break on was taking a nap really on a cot we had down there. And started to tell him about the phone calls, but before I could say anything really, we got a large sound going. It was really a horn going off, and that indicated that there was a problem with one of the missiles. We looked over at the status board that we had. Normally, the missiles showed green status, meaning they were ready to launch. Um, this one was red now. There was one that was red, and then very shortly afterwards, they all went down. By down, I mean they had some kind of a failure mode.
malfunction.
All 10 of them, yeah. And we had a way of checking the failure mode uh, by some kind of an audio recording. And it said on each of them, guidance and control system failure. So we had an inertial guidance system on these missiles, meaning uh, we had gyroscopes, accelerometers, those kinds of instruments uh, that would determine how the missile was traveling on its target. Uh, so in flight, it would make calculations internally. We didn't have GPS at the time. This is not, we didn't have satellites up there that are navigation satellites or anything like that. It was all inertial guidance. So uh, all that's why the missile shut down. The inertial guidance system had failed. So, and we also had indicators showing at two of the launch facilities there was possible intrusion or incursion into those missile sites. And so I called up to send guards out there. Of course, I asked him about the bright red light he was looking at, and he said it just flown off, just as I called. It just flown off. So it was up there when the missiles went down. Um, and I directed guards to go out to those facilities, two of them. And again, they saw the bright light over each of those two facilities. So they reported them there also. Uh, After that call, oh, by the way, the guard that got injured wasn't serious. He cut his hand. And later I found out it was either from uh, trying to climb the fence where we had barbed wire on the
Okay.
fence surrounding the facility, or he had jammed it in his rifle somehow. But anyway, it was a relatively minor cut, but we did send him back to the base hospital by helicopter. Um, but nothing to do with the UFO itself or
Okay.
causing any injury to him. That was not that did not happen. Uh, and then I hung up that call, and my commander turned to me after he spoke with the wing command post where he reported our incident, and he said the same thing happened at another flight. Now, the way he said it, I thought he meant that evening, but as it turned out later, it happened 8 days earlier. And that was what we'll call the Echo Flight incident. So we were at Oscar at Echo Flight 8 days earlier. The same kind of thing happened, but this time UFOs were seen by security and maintenance people at two of the launch facilities, and they were right above the missile itself. And again, they shut down all 10 of their missiles. Same failure mode, guidance and control system failure. That, in a nutshell, is what happened
Okay.
that evening.
Okay. And since then, well, you've been all over the world reporting on this. I know that you testified in the Brazilian Congress, did you?
Senate, the
In
Brazilian
the Senate. And
Senate.
what was that like? You spoke about your case as well?
Yes, absolutely. I spoke about my case, and the Brazilians are taking this very seriously. And the purpose of that presentation, I was one of, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 others that spoke to the senators of Brazil. Uh, and their purpose, of course, is to see if they can find out more information about things that happened, particularly in Brazil, but other places in the world, involving these objects, these unknown objects, which we call UFOs. Um, and then again in Mexico City, I spoke
Yeah.
to this time to the House of essentially their House of Representatives.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so, but I have not yet spoke to our U.S. Congress.
That's what I wanted to ask you about because in the recent hearings, you were with Representative Nancy Mace and Mr. Steve Bassett, who is a friend of the show. He's been on the show. Um, the guys from Total Disclosure podcast were the ones that released this video where you're talking to Representative Mace. I wanted to ask you what your sensibilities were when you were speaking to her, and why on earth haven't they asked you to testify? Because I'm 100% confident that you would under oath without question, you know? So
Absolutely.
why do you think that happened?
I can give you my theory on that, but yeah, I did speak to Representative Bass after the hearing that she chaired in Congress, the last public hearing. Uh, I was able to, through the help of Tyler Roberts, who runs the Total Disclosure podcast, with his help, I was able to set up a meeting with her that evening in her office and with Steve Bassett and Tyler Roberts taking the video of that meeting. Anybody that wants to see that can go to that Total Podcast
I'm,
site.
I'm gonna leave the link in the description, of
Yeah,
course.
and they can watch the whole thing, uh, including the point where she says, after I answer her questions about my incident, she's said she's very interested in this connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons facilities, and would like to have a hearing particularly on that. So that was encouraging to hear, of course, and I hope that she still follows through with that. And from the latest statement by Representative Luna,
Yeah.
I think you're probably familiar with that.
Yes, I am. Yeah, yeah.
He said that this was one of the areas the UFO or UAP subject is one of the areas they want more um, information about these things, and they're going to have more hearings. So hopefully I'm still in the running to be invited. Now, why haven't I been invited to this point? Uh, my theory is that because this is a subject involving nuclear weapons
Yeah.
and um, the basis, the very foundation of U.S. national security, and I'm quoting now the Department of Defense Nuclear Posture Review, which comes out periodically, like every 2 years or so, states that the basic foundation of U.S. national security is nuclear deterrence, um, which is, I think, a very poor reason to have nuclear weapons. In other words, they think if the world or any other country is afraid of attack, or we are afraid of attacking any other country, the fact that we have so many nuclear weapons and the destructive power of each of these weapons uh, would deter them from attacking the United States. Well, that's fine. I think most reasonable or rational people understand that any kind of a nuclear exchange of nuclear weapons would be catastrophic for our civilization,
The entire world. Yeah.
the entire world. The nuclear weapons that we have now, and I'm not giving out any classified information. This has been published in the by a group called what's their name? uh, Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. This group was formed by the atomic scientists that developed the first atomic bomb. Right after the bomb was used, they realized that this was a horrible weapon, and they've been monitoring activity in this area since then. And they have a website. It's called Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. And some years ago, they issued a report showing the weaponry or the nuclear weapon on some of the missiles, including the Minuteman I missile. And they published that and for the public to see. It's not classified. And we had 800 kiloton bomb, nuclear bomb, on Minuteman I at one point. 800 kilotons, that's almost 1,000,000 tons of TNT equivalent. For reference, the bombs used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were 15 to 20 kilotons.
Holy crap.
So
That's
you can imagine that,
wow.
and about 100,000 people were wiped out in the initial blast. And this is an approximation, of course. Nobody knows for sure. And then years later, that number grew to about 200 or more thousand people that were killed as a result of these nuclear bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, each one. So you can imagine what an 800 kiloton bomb would do to a city. Pretty devastating.
Pretty frightening too.
So because of that, I think the DoD, the Department of Defense, and the intelligence community are reluctant to invite me to speak openly about my incident because clearly not only my incident, but many others just like it. Or I'll tell you, there was another incident in 1966 at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, where again, 10 nuclear missiles were disabled during a UFO encounter. It happened in September of 1966. There was a gentleman by the name of David Shindeli, who was an officer at the time that relieved the crew where this happened, find out this information, and he has been publicly speaking about it. So uh, within the span of 6 months, we had 30 nuclear missiles disabled by UFOs.
Whoa.
And and in there have been other places in the world where UFOs have come over and interacted with nuclear weapons facilities or storage areas, simply flying over and shining a beam of light on where the weapons were stored. I list about 13 instances total in my books that I've written, and there have been many more that have been unreported. So to me, and I believe these are not human operators of these UFOs,
Yeah.
are giving us a message. And that message is get rid of these uh, weapons. They're not even weapons because we'd never use them in wartime. But get rid of these. Otherwise, we are going to destroy civilization as we know it.
You think that's the message? It's like a threat towards humanity.
I wouldn't call it a threat. No, I would call it a warning to us to take care to rid ourselves of these weapons so that they won't be used by us to destroy every living thing on this planet.
Yeah.
It's not a threat that they would somehow um, destroy our weapons or keep us from using them. I don't know that they would. But it certainly is the message I think they are sending is one of a warning to us that of the extreme risk we are taking by having these weapons, that they will eventually be used
Yeah.
by
Uh,
us.
you've both written and co-written. I counted 4 books. Is that correct?
Three.
Three. Okay, so one is unidentified, the UFO phenomenon. The other one is UAPs and the nuclear puzzle. And
Yes,
the other one is Faded Giant. Is that correct?
that's
Yeah.
correct.
I'm gonna leave it in the description so people can check them out because you go through a lot of cases there, and it's um, necessary reading, in my opinion. You were also part of arguably one of the most famous books about this specific topic, which is called UFOs and Nukes. Is that correct? From Robert Hastings. You were
That's
one of his
correct.
cases.
Yes.
Eh, What was the experience like with Mr. Hastings? And I also want to ask you about Dr. Jacobs, but let's start with Hastings first.
Yes. Bob Hastings and I, or Robert Hastings and I, have collaborated many times. We gave, well, a few times, gave presentations to the national media at the National Press Club. Uh, and of course, he wrote this book, which described many other incidents uh, regarding nuclear weapons and UFO sightings. Um, and so We brought in other witnesses, gave our presentations to the press. Some were more, let's say, well received than others. But in general, uh, we've been trying to get the word out to the public because our government has not, as we just talked about, chosen to acknowledge these incidents. However, I can say that I gave my testimony to the All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, or
Arrow.
ARROW.
Yeah.
Um,
I wanted to ask you about that. What was that experience like? Did you speak to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick
no,
directly or
no, I didn't speak to him directly. I spoke to people who were working for him at the time. Uh, I gave a 2.5 hour presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation, which had images of 22 documents or pieces of evidence that I've accumulated supporting the two incidents at Malmstrom, Echo Flight and Oscar Flight, including audio recordings of the witnesses and affidavits, etc. At the end of that, uh, they asked me a couple more questions, and then I said, "Can I ask a question?" And I said, "Will you be asking the Air Force to validate anything I've told you?" And their answer was no, uh, because they had tried to validate uh, facts when they interviewed, I think it was Robert Jacobs, um, and his incident. The Air Force, we couldn't find anyone in the Air Force that had any knowledge of it. And so basically, they were a little frustrated that the Air Force wasn't supplying them with uh, any uh, knowledge of any of these incidents, which I guess to this day, that's still the Air Force stance.
yeah.
Uh, we know nothing. So it's really up to it's going to take a strong effort by Congress, maybe even intervention by the president to force this information to come out.
Yeah, and the Air Force and the Department of Energy are like the usual suspects alongside the CIA, I think, who have remained either mysteriously quiet or they have stated things against those who have come forward. And I find that really it's pretty obvious that they are the ones with the keys to everything, really, with the secrets. But I wanted to like move on a little bit because you told me that you believe these are non-human intelligence that are doing this. But I wanted to ask you your perspective over the years. Has your perspective on what the phenomenon is changed over the years, or has it stayed the same? Because there's a lot of literature. For example, there's Jacques Vallée's written work. There's John Keel, who are like some of the OGs who have spoken about the phenomenon. But I don't know if you have any interactions with the phenomenon itself, because there's a lot of people that see things and then they start experiencing strange things. So I wanted to ask you about that. What is your perspective on the phenomenon?
Right. Well, when I first started going public, I was in 1994, and doing my own research, I got contacted by people uh, that had what I considered unbelievable stories. Uh, and so I would kind of dismiss some of the stories that I heard, but as time went on and I kept hearing the same thing from different people, I began to change my perspective on what this phenomenon is about. And it is a very strange and complex phenomenon. And then in 1985, I had my own up close and personal experience with these non-human intelligence creatures or beings. And but it wasn't until about, I want to say about 2008 or nine, uh, that I realized what had happened during my experience. And of course, that was a major enlightenment, I guess, of the breadth and width of this phenomenon. I can tell you because I've written about it in one of my books and spoken about it openly since 2013, I think it was. But in 1985, I was in this particular house that I remember living in Manhattan Beach, California, with my wife and two small children. And that evening, we had all gone to bed, and I suddenly woke up and noticed there was a bluish light coming from our living room. And I woke my wife up, and I pointed to the light, and she said she saw it also. Uh, and I said, I'm going to have to get up and investigate. Obviously, it could be someone in the house because we had no blue lights in the living room. But as I started to get up, I became paralyzed. And I remember struggling with all the strength I had to try to recover my mobility, but I couldn't move. At one point, I asked my wife for help. I couldn't move, and now she was unconscious. Um, the next thing, I saw a figure in the doorway. It looked somewhat like a human, but I couldn't make out its face. It had a hood on. I could see that, but other than that, I can't tell you any more at this point. By the way, what I'm telling you is based on 4 sessions of hypnotic therapy that I've had to
Okay.
recover these memories. So, uh, next thing I recall is there were small beings in the room, our bedroom. They seemed like children to me at the time. I had no perspective on any kind of non-humans, but they seemed like children, small children, and I didn't know what they were doing there. But soon I was being lifted off the bed, rising up off the bed and floating, and then somehow they floated me towards the bedroom window, which I had locked that night, and it was latched. It was a latch up there, uh, and I thought they couldn't even reach the latch if they were going to take me out the window, but uh, they didn't bother with that. They took me right through the window,
That's wild.
and again, this is memories I've recovered under therapy. But I know it sounds ridiculous, but
No.
uh, I went right through the window without breaking any glass, anything like that.
Do you think it might be possible that based on the studies that have already been done about astral projection, that they may have taken just like your astral self and left your body there. That's what happened, right? That's what it sounds like it happened.
I don't know. I don't know anything about astral projection, but like I say, I've got an open mind, more of an open mind now as to what can happen with these
Yeah.
this. The next thing I recalled was being on a table, like a operating table, uh, uh, likely inside a craft, and I was being shown a long needle, very long needle, and it was held right in front of my eyes. It was placed right in front of my eyes and held by these long, bony fingers. Long, bony fingers. Remember that because I'll talk about something else later. And they communicated to me telepathically that they were going to insert this into my groin area and it wouldn't hurt, as they said, but as they started to do that, it hurt like it was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And that's the second reason I'm certain this was not a dream. First reason was my struggle with the paralysis. I remember struggling and working so hard physically. I remember that effort I made to recover my mobility, but I never did. The second reason was this pain. The third reason is I'll bring up later, but so they performed this procedure. It hurt like hell. I communicated that, and the pain went away almost instantly. Uh, then I was taken to another cubicle, turned around by again a small being, and he poked two fingers down my spine like that. There was no pain involved there. Uh, that's all he did. Turned me around. They floated me. I was floating the whole time. I wasn't walking uh, along a curved corridor, and then bright light at the end, and I was back in my bed. The next morning, like I said, I didn't remember any of this. My wife didn't remember any of it at all. We never spoke of it until about uh, 2009, I think. We were in Ireland. We were in Ireland and we were at a conference there I was speaking at, and there was an experiencer who got up and talked about her experience, and my wife was sitting next to me, and we listened to her. And at one point, she said, and then a blue light uh, came into my room, and just I was covered in blue light. And something clicked in my head. And I turned to my wife and said, "Do you remember a blue light in our bedroom a long time ago?" And she said, yes, she remembered that specifically. So that's the third reason. I'm sure this was not a dream or some kind of a fantasy I made up in my head, because she confirmed the fact that a blue light came into our bedroom. Uh, and it was that evening, that very evening, Mary Rodwell, I don't know if you've heard that name. She's a person that works with experiencers, happened to be there at that conference, and I asked her for a session that evening. And that's when I started having these hypnotic sessions.
Yeah, I've heard of her and her work too. Okay. Um, because I don't know if if you saw that interview that Lieutenant Colonel John Blitch did with Ross Coulthard, where he speaks about the abduction phenomenon more openly. And he said that this was like the linchpin of the secrecy, that the real reason that governments are hiding this secret is because of the abductions, because they have been out of control for forever. Um, and what do you think about more people coming forward and telling their stories as you have? Do you think it's necessary? Do you think
I think
uh
it's important. It's important to do that because uh, that body of information, and you're right, other people have spoken about abductions, many others. And of course, we had the psychiatrist from Harvard,
John
uh,
Mock?
John Mack,
Yeah.
uh, uh, spoke with the children in Africa that had seen an object. And anyway, and he spoke to other people who've been taken. Yeah, I think that would be the key to getting the government to finally uh, tell more and more about what they know about this phenomenon. Is if real people come forward publicly uh, and speak in a nationwide venue about their incidents.
Yeah,
I think it's real important.
I
But it
agree.
a certain amount of courage because you're exposing yourself uh, to ridicule and everybody has a job and they don't want to lose their jobs and be ridiculed and that sort of thing. So it does take some courage to do this, but I think it's important.
I wanted to ask you, just go back a little bit to why do you think the phenomenon seems to be attracted to nuclear energy? Do you think it's because they're trying to warn us, or do you think they're attracted to it in some way?
All right. What I think is if these beings are as advanced as we think they are, uh, in their evolutionary stages, I'm sure they've had, well, I'm not sure, but I think they've probably had their own problems with weaponry, uh, possibly fighting among themselves, as we seem to do a lot in war. And they have gone through the whole process of even developing nuclear weapons themselves, and they understand, um, let's say, the stupidity of doing that and how much harm it could do. Uh, there have been some indications by uh, communications with these beings by experiencers that uh, our testing of nuclear weapons, even our testing, affects them in some way. It affects other life forms in other parts of our solar system and our our universe. So I think they're very interested in seeing that we try to eliminate these weapons ourselves. Uh, of course, they have shown that they can disable them at times, uh, but I think the better option is for we to evolve to the point or our consciousness to understand uh, that we have to take care of this ourselves and that we would be then better prepared really to meet other uh, life forms out there, advanced life forms, and in peace, in a peaceful way.
Yeah, so it's part of that maturing process that civilization has to go through, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I wanted to ask you also about the Nazca Mummies and your involvement in that whole movement because, as we know, there's been a lot of misinformation since they came out and a lot of contradicting stories. You are convinced that they are real bodies. I've done a lot of coverage on my channel that also points towards that. But I wanted to ask you, when did you get involved and when did you realize that these were actually real?
Yeah, I think it was, I'm trying to say 2017 or 2018. I got a call from a friend who said he was going down to Peru to listen to presentations by scientists who had been investigating and doing scientific tests on these bodies, these so-called Nazca mummies. Um, and at that time, of course, there had been other instances of, let's say, people presenting objects that turned out to be uh,
Manufactured?
manufactured. And so, at first I told him no, I wasn't interested in that. And but he pointed me to a website. I think it's still up. It's called the Alien Project. You can go to that website, THE-alien project, and that's put up by
Thierry Jamal.
yeah, yeah, Thierry Jamin. Uh, and so I went there and started looking through some of the photographs. And one of the photographs, and some of the things they had recovered was these detached hands,
Yeah.
very large hands with long, bony fingers. And when I saw those fingers, it reminded me of that incident,
Oh,
the long, bony fingers that were holding this needle in front of my eyes. So,
wow. That's wild. Wow.
so that really gave me the impetus, motivation to go down there. And I did. I sat through the presentations of DNA analysis, uh, aging analysis, um, physiological tests that they had done, and I was able to speak with the scientists. Actually, they gave those presentations, and as a result, they invited me to go actually see the mummies, and because they were hidden away at an undisclosed site that they didn't want anybody else to know where they were. So I did. I went and saw the mummies myself. I held them. I inspected everything closely, and of course listened to their presentations, which, by the way, are supported by well-respected laboratories
Yeah.
throughout the world. And I was convinced that these were real. These were not manufactured or taken from bones of other creatures and put together in and to this date, uh, there's been more and more uh,
Evidence.
evidence and scientists that have concluded that these are real. That at one point these beings lived, uh, and there's some amazing results from all
Yeah.
these tridactyls. So, and that's going to continue. There will be another such meeting as I attended later in the spring of this year in Peru. Um, and we'll find out more information, but more validation is expected.
I think what surprised me the most about this case entirely are those hands because they were carbon dated to like 5,000 years ago, which is kind of around the time when the Egyptians were still around. A little bit later, but between 5 and 6,000 years ago were carbon dated. And the one that is pregnant. That's what made me go like, wait, this can't be hoaxed. This is way too uh clinical, way too perfect to be hoaxed. It's just impossible. The
Right.
little fetus has the three fingers. It's like that's a slam dunk right there. You can't really uh even try to debunk that. I don't see a way to try and debunk that. It's and yet there's been a lot of noise still around the case.
Of course.
As with any of these cases, yours too. It's like when it's really, really serious and sometimes even overwhelming, because I know it can be overwhelming to think about the past like that, especially if our civilization from that era was communing with these beings at some level. That's really fringe to think about if you think about it for a bit. And I get why people like instantly feel the need to jump and just like reject it, but I think that it's our responsibility of people that understand a little bit more of this to like make people feel less uncomfortable with these topics. um
Yeah, and science will do that. I mean, if you have the scientific evidence, you've got highly qualified scientists that are performing these tests and validating and verifying them. Uh, that will eventually bring most people around uh, to to giving this a close look. Absolutely.
yeah, and hopefully we see that with the next hearings in the spring that are going to be in Peru. um just like the final part of the questionnaire that I have for you, it has to do with whistleblowers that have come forward. I wanted to ask your specific take on three of them. One of them is Lou Elizondo. Do you know Lou? What do you think about his efforts? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, uh, I guess I have, of course, I have met Lou. Actually, at one point, he came to my home here to record me my testimony so that he could put it on his. I think it was a History Channel special he was doing. I agreed to it uh, on the basis that I could interview him about his background, etc. And he agreed. But when it came down to answering my questions about what was ATIP all about, uh, how much information did he get, um, how did that work out, et cetera, things like that. He wouldn't answer my questions. So to me, he kind of reneged on that promise. I don't want to say anything bad about Lou. I know uh, he's worked in this area uh, as the leader of the so-called ATIP program, uh, but he still works in the intelligence community. And so that makes me wonder whether or not he's truly working for disclosure or trying to help the intelligence community cover up. I don't want to say either way, but
Yeah,
I think you understand what I'm saying.
yeah. There's a
It's
lot of people that have these doubts about Lou, so you're not the only one.
we
Yeah,
can live with that.
yeah. What about David Grusch and what he's done so far?
I think David Grusch has done a courageous thing coming forward, uh, claiming, of course, he's claiming he's spoken with people that have worked on recovered craft and even recovered biologics, shall we say, of these non-human entities. However, he's not a primary witness.
Yeah.
He's a man that knows a man, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so what we really need is witnesses that have actually worked in this directly on these things and are willing to testify or given the authority to testify. That's what we truly need.
This leads us to the most recent one. I don't know if you noticed, Jake Barber came forward with Ross Coulthart, and
Yeah.
he claims to have that firsthand experience and knowledge. What is your take on him coming forward and everything he talked about?
Well, just to start with, I was convinced that the U.S. government, was involved in recovering craft. Uh, Many years ago, I met, I don't think of his name. Let's say a man who's been public about having worked on teams, recovery teams. Uh, Stone, yeah, Stone is his last name, but so I was convinced really by him that he had actually worked on these teams and that the government was recovering downed craft. Um, so going in, listening to Mr. Barber, there's no question in my mind that that activity has gone on, and I think he's very credible, makes a very credible witness. Um, and I think there are people that can support what he says. There are other witnesses. Uh, all that has to happen is for him to get whistleblower protection, uh, and then I'm sure he would come forward and speak at a hearing in Congress. And we need that. We need to hear from him directly, answer questions of Congress in a public setting, like I said.
What do you think about the psionics aspect of what he testified to with Ross? Do you think that is possible? Do you think that's real? That we have these capabilities as humans?
Absolutely. Well, by psionics, if you're talking about things like telepathic communications,
Remote viewing and all that?
what's that? And remote
Remote
viewing.
viewing.
Yes. Yeah, well, the remote viewing project went on, sponsored by the CIA and the at Stanford University. Uh, Dr. Hal Puthoff has already uh, admitted that he was part of that program, and others have already admitted that there was some success to that developing those capabilities. So there's no reason to disbelieve it at this point. Uh, so yeah, I think that's another valid uh, uh, phenomenon that ought to be looked into.
Perfect. And one final one that he came forward differently to the others, which is Jason Sands. Are you familiar with his story or not?
I'm not.
No.
Name sounds familiar, but can you refresh me on his story?
He was recently on James Fox's documentary, The Program. He's the one who told the story about this encounter with a blue-skinned being that communicated with him telepathically, and this was happening right outside Dreamland. Um, so I don't know if perhaps you don't know about his story, but I will refer you to it, and then we can talk about it on a different podcast because I think that's I've been talking to people that are from either the military or the intelligence community that know Jason Sands, and they say that he's credible, but his story is really unbelievable, to be honest with you. He's like talking about direct contact with a higher form of intelligence directly, like talking to them. So that really blew my mind when he first came forward, and I wanted to ask you about that. But we'll talk about it later. That's not a problem.
Uh,
Um,
has the James Fox movie, the program, has it been released?
yes, it released in December.
Wow, I haven't seen it. Is it on Netflix or anything like that?
It's on, I think it's Amazon and Tubi, and there's
Okay,
a bunch of platforms. I'll send you the link
great.
after we finish so you can check it out.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess I just wanted to tell you that I feel very honored to be speaking with you, with someone who had such an important wrote such an important page of this whole story, because what happened with you and, for example, Dr. Jacobs, I think, even though it seems overwhelming sometimes and daunting, I think it needs to be addressed. And I hope that you can get your time to speak to Congress under oath so you can talk about this on a more official manner. But I want to thank you for your courage and for your service to humanity too, because it's not just the US. I think any military person works and serves humanity in general, not just their country, you know? So thank you.
Well, thank you, Pavel. I appreciate it. I've been committed to revealing everything I know since about 1994, like I said, when felt I could come forward, and I will continue to do so. And if it happens that I'm not invited to testify before Congress, I will still be uh, writing and speaking about my incident and other similar incidents.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess that's it for me today. But I want to ask you, where can people find you if they want to maybe connect with you? Could you let us know?
Well, let's see. First, if people want to see some of the evidence I have on my incident, they can go to my website, spiralgalaxy.org. Um, and I also have a YouTube channel, Bob Salas at Giant Head 3, where I've got videos of presentations I've made on this entire subject. Uh, if people want to contact me, I hesitate to give my email out.
No, no, no. Maybe
They're
X. You're active on X, aren't you?
active on X. People can send me messages there. I will be more active on Blue Sky soon, and maybe people can contact me there also. I'm on LinkedIn. Um, I'm on Facebook also.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
gonna leave everything on the description. So if people want to reach out to Mr. Salas, that's the way to do it. But I want to thank you, Mr. Salas. I hope we can do this again sometime soon. If you get a chance to testify, I would love to have you on right after. That'd be really cool. So you can let us know how it went.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, and have a
Okay.
great rest of your week. And thank you, guys. Remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you, Mr. Salas. It's been an honor, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.